athletes that we can be, and like just being kinder to yourself. That's something I always remind all my ladies about. Hey, you're on your period, you don't feel good, like be kind to yourself. Just pull it back a little bit. How are you feeling? How can we, modify today? And how can we get the most out of today as well, depending on where you're at in your cycle.
So that brings up a good topic now, the menstrual cycle. I think there are a lot of, all coaches, not just men, women as well, often have a bit of a difficult time potentially just even bringing it up, right? Just it being a topic of conversation with athletes. And at a certain level in high school, it might also be with parents. And so, you don't really get trained for that as a coach, I don't think. There's no sort of guide as to how to potentially learn how to bring this up. But certainly as athletes yourselves and now as coaches, of course you've been through it, and so you kind of know what it feels like, how it might feel like to be approached by a coach about it. And so what would be important lessons here for coaches in terms of approaching topics or discussions around the menstrual cycle, and where do you even start?
I think it's important to recognize it as a performance marker. Like it's a health marker, but it also can lead to positive performance. And it's really, really important that girls are getting their menstrual cycle, because the hormones that you're getting from that help to build bone. And we know that stress fracture is the demon of distance running. And so if you don't have the bone building that is crucial between the ages of 18 and 22, I believe, that are coming from the hormones that you're getting when you're getting your menstrual cycle, you're really going to put yourself at a disservice later in life, not only long term, but even in the short term as an athlete. So it's important to just ask the question, and then also, okay, you're not getting your period. Why not? And it's not acceptable for the doctors to say it's because you're a distance runner. I don't think. And I've had that before, and it's not. And I don't want to say proven them wrong, but I've pulled back on training and increased nutrition, and athletes have gotten their periods. So we know it can be done. So it's not okay to say that you're not going to get your period until you stop running, or until you're not a distance runner. So it can happen. I got my period all through my elite career, and I have 2 kids right after finishing my athletic career, one in the middle of it. So I think it's really a natural conversation you need to have with athletes and be okay with it. And at first, athletes might be uncomfortable talking about it, but I think you just need to really be understanding and not judgmental as well. Like, okay, you're not getting your period. What can we do? What kind of conversations can we have with doctors, and what are the steps we need to take?
And so just on that, let's say as a coach, this is brought up and the response isn't good, whether it's from the athlete or a parent at the younger level. In your experiences, if at all, perhaps this never happened, but what's the solution here? How do you handle that? What's the approach? Any experiences along those lines?
For sure. I mean, I think it's important to engage experts. You have to have a sports doctor or a doctor involved, and maybe a physiologist, nutritionist. There's a lot of people that have experts in this area. There's good information out there on relative energy deficit in sport, REDS. And so as a coach, you're the power figure. And so sometimes that can be taken in the wrong way if you're approaching it. So I think you need a backing of good medical experts in a team around you, or ask the athlete if they can go see their family doctor to explore some of the issues, because most doctors will say, okay, you're 16 and you haven't gotten your period. Okay, what's going on? Let's look into that. So it can't just be the coach. It needs to be a team approach.
Yeah, definitely. Coming from the collegiate system, like I just came from, it gets a little bit sticky as a coach in that environment, because the school's trying to protect their doctors, and their doctors are trying to protect the athletic trainers. And it's all this big web of people that want to help. They have the best of intentions for the athlete. But it almost takes the coach out of the equation, and which could be good. Like Hillary was saying, it might be a little bit more comfortable, but I guess at that collegiate system, it gets a little bit sticky. And if you can encourage your athletes to really, utilize those doctors and the team nutritionists and sports psychology, all of that, because it is like this big overarching thing that, that isn't just one thing over the other. It's a bigger issue, or it could be a bigger issue of what the athlete is going through. So you just got to figure out where the stem of it is. Is it nutritional? Is it psychology? Or what is it exactly?
Right. So, a lot of high school athletes might get through, female athletes might get through high school with no problems in terms of injuries or any types of factors associated with REDS, as Hillary brought up, or relative energy deficiency in sports. And we can share some information on that a bit after in the notes here. But that transition from high school to college is so drastic. Like middle school to high school, for example, in the US, that's a thing. Like a lot of middle school kids, compete and train. A lot of coaches here on the Memphis Youth Athletics page are middle school coaches. You're still at home, right? The transition is pretty easy. And you go from middle school to high school, it's not really a big difference. But from high school to college, you might leave home. Your parents might not be cooking anymore, all this stuff. And also you've got a transition to a different support system. And I'm not sure about your schools that you work at, Hillary, now, and Shayla, when you work at Cal Berkeley, but what are things that female high school runners should consider as they are being recruited in terms of, specific support like that? What are types of questions you guys feel might be worthwhile asking as they're being recruited to make that transition a bit easier?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think it's important to ask about team retention rates, meaning how many athletes go through 4 or 5 years, or how many athletes are lost with injury or leave the team. What kind of support system you have medically. So are there doctors? Are there physiotherapists, mental performance, anything like that? I think it's good to ask those questions and what support you have so that you know that you're not alone. It's such a challenge. The first year that you see a student athlete, you're getting to know them. And so if they're struggling with mental health, you don't know if that's their norm. You don't know if they're depressed or what the baseline is. And so it's a real challenge as a coach to get to know the athlete. And so I think using resources of expertise is so important. And communicating with coaches, I always reach out to the high school coach and the parents if I can to know what their network was like previously. But I think it's really important for the athletes to take ownership of their environment and to reach out and use resources as much as possible. Yeah. And talk to the coach, obviously.
Yeah, no, all of that spot on. And then the other, I would take it to maybe another level of are they sports specific in their expertise? Like is the nutritionist sports specific? Is the team doctor an actual sports doctor? Or is it just a family type doctor, so that's the other thing. Like, okay, what are these people's actual background, and dig deeper into that.
Yeah, great point.
Yeah, thank you. That's super valuable. I think there's a lot of there's a lot of high school coaches listening, and I know a couple of high school athletes as well. So that's valuable. So I guess a big question. I've heard all sorts of opinions, and I don't like to rely on opinions often, but that's what often coaches have. And full disclosure, a lot of these opinions have been from male coaches. And the big thing is that many coaches, their approach to the menstrual cycle is, well, you can't change competitions around, So there's not a whole lot you can do about the menstrual cycle, right? So we obviously know that's not true, in that there's a lot of things you can do. You can't change competitions, but there are things that can be done to at least manage potentially symptoms. So do you have sort of personal insight, or even resources or things that high school coaches or even collegiate coaches can use to be able to potentially come up with good strategies to manage symptoms or pain associated with the menstrual cycle?
I would say that I'm also in line with that. Sometimes you can't change that there's a race at a certain day. And so mental strategies can be great, where you just know that you've been able to train in different states in your cycle, and know that you're going to do the best you can on that day. And there's so many factors that can cause a good race or bad race. And so if you focus on just one thing, I think that is doing yourself a disservice. So I think it's preparing yourself as best you can for the race or the workout. And, that's hydrating well and having the proper nutrition and the proper sleep, and doing the best you can, but also knowing that you can race well under suboptimal conditions, and practicing that in training and having good feedback positively from the coach and yourself on that. And I think that creates a good environment, but it's also important to track your menstrual cycle. We keep training logs, and athletes often will put it in their training log so they know and they can anticipate what their body's going to be going through, and start to notice when they might need to pull back on training in terms of intensity on that day to help them, because there is a difference with the load that you put your body through in training, and maybe being more fatigued in, when you're going through your menstrual cycle, and being able to pull back on that in training versus a race happens on that day, but you might be a little less fatigued because you pulled back to peak or whatnot. So you can manipulate those things and understand what helps and what works for you. And it's just tracking, like keeping a training log, writing notes, knowing what works for you, talking to your coach, so that you can prepare the best you can for those experiences.
Yeah, I mean, definitely on the same page as what Hillary just expressed. I think we've had some really great days where it's like, okay, coach, got my period today. This is what's happening. And like, okay, well, we know that your body responds X, Y, and Z. So we're going to get through it. We're going to do the best that we can today. And then they get through it and they're like, wow, if I can do that, kind of ends up giving a lot of confidence at the end of the day. It's like, oh yeah, okay, well that's way better. And it's just like working through that each time it happens. And, like the week before you get your period, you're pretty fatigued, and, just kind of being kinder to yourself in those moments too. Like that's something I constantly preach, is be kind to yourself, get through it, get the most out of today in each and every day, really. So
that's great. So as coaches as well, so knowing this from having, been through it as athletes yourselves at a high level, and, like, for example, Hillary at the Olympic Games, it could just happen that that's it, right? Like the prelims or the semis or whatever. And so as coaches, knowing this now, are there things that you can, knowing that, let's say, athlete X responds very differently than most other athletes, the week before, for example, or the days before. What are things that you guys look for to hopefully help them out? Is it that you might say something like, hey, today you'll do a bit less volume on a track session or on an easy run, or what are things you might adjust as coaches to sort of help with that?
I think everything, you can learn so much from training. And so watching an athlete or having an athlete give a rate of perceived exertion in training, and knowing what their norms are, and then what that is compared to being on their menstrual cycle. So some things that you could do are pull back on volume, but some athletes get really fatigued from neural work, so speed work or plyometrics or anything like that, and that might be more affected when they're on their cycle. So it's paying attention to those things. So if an athlete gets already fatigued from a certain amount of types of training, such as endurance work or neural work, then maybe paying attention to that even more when they're on their cycle might help you adapt their training. And just feedback, talking to your athletes, asking them, how do you feel today? Can you give me an RP, a rate of perceived exertion, and how can we adapt? Because athletes start to know their body, and I don't think it's acceptable to have a suck it up attitude all the time. I think you do have to be tough, and there's ways to create resiliency and mental toughness, but it's also important that athletes trust you have their back, and that's asking their opinions on how they're feeling. And then you start to recognize what athletes are being honest and what they can handle, and appropriately pushing them. But at a young age, when you're getting your period for the first time, you're also trying to figure out your body, and that's scary, and that's going to change over time. So I like what Shayla was saying about be kind to yourself, because I think that's really important as you're growing and developing as a female athlete, and as a male athlete too. You're changing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's just spot on. Yeah, couldn't agree more.
I guess so. I think it's such an interesting topic. It's a topic that's getting studied more and more in sports sciences, and there's a bit more data out now. And but it's still foreign, right, to most people. If you were to give advice to a young coach, right, doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, but sort of coach going through, it might be high school coaching and maybe college even, and maybe coaching female athletes for the first time. With respect to that, like what's the last sort of like advice before they get in there, and they might be worried about it, like how do you encourage a young coach that's sort of get going to that aspect?
Do you mean just having a female athlete that might be on her period?
Well, let's say I'm a young coach and I've never coached women before, and all of a sudden I become a coach at a university in the U.S. or Canada, and I have 14, 18 to 21-year-olds that I'm coaching, women. What's your advice there for a young coach, man or woman?
Yeah, I think at that age, I mean, I don't coach that age, but I would say that I would recommend still involving the parents, and because they are still the guardians, and you're still working with that young age group, to know what they're comfortable with. But once you get to know the athletes, then having that conversation of doing everything to fuel your body and to take care of your body is really crucial. I do honestly think more of the trouble is the women that aren't getting their periods. And if they're getting their periods and they're having, all the symptoms and cramping, let's celebrate that. That's awesome. You're getting your period and you're training, and, let's deal with those things. But really where we're at the higher risk is when they're not getting their periods, and what is the cause of that. So I think coaches need to pay attention to that, and talking to the athletes about if they're fueling properly. What we see a lot is the young athlete starts to train more, but they don't adapt their eating. They don't eat more when they're training more. Maybe they don't recognize that they're as hungry, or they think that they need to be really healthy and eat really well to be an elite athlete. And then the cause of that is they're not getting enough fuel. And I think it's important for coaches to have the conversation of, are you eating enough? Are you going to bed hungry? If you are, that's a problem. You need to fuel more. Are you feeling really exhausted the next day after a workout? You probably didn't fuel properly. Are you bringing snacks to a workout to get that nutrition within the 2-hour window after a workout? So I think it's important to have those discussions early, because as we train more, girls and boys, men and women, we need to fuel more. And that is going to contribute to your body working properly. Otherwise, you kind of go into hibernation mode where your body shuts down and the hormones stop working, and the recovery doesn't happen correctly because you're not getting the right fuel. So those are the conversations I think are more crucial. then of course, the emotional conversations because you're on your period, but I think that's less of an issue.
Yeah, I think also like the way that I like to approach that conversation is like kind of giving them a visual as well, of, your body is an engine, and it's like you have this fire inside of you and you're trying to fuel that fire. So you want to eat as much as possible to keep that ignited, keep that fire roaring. The more you can do that, you can eat a lot and feel fueled. And like Hillary said, go to bed not feeling hungry. That's great. But also come at it as, hey, I care a lot about you, so we're having this conversation. It's for your health. It's for the rest of your life. That's something I always say. It's like, this is about the rest of your life. It's not about the next 4 or 5 years of your life. It's so you can have a baby someday. So, maybe I can get away more with that being a woman, but I think the more you get comfortable with your athletes, the better and more receptive they're going to be to that. And then also, at the end of the day, we're also trying to be performers and perform at the highest level. So you can come at it at a few different angles and just know your athlete. So know kind of which antidote to kind of go towards.
All right. So on that topic, I guess I'll ask a question for coaches specifically, or well, to you guys as coaches, but also hopefully for coaches. So one thing I've noticed being Canadian and moving to the US, something you will inevitably hear if you're around distance coaches who are in the NCAA is, and this is not everybody, of course, this is just more an observation that's fairly typical, where it seems that the approach in college is to, kids come in, a lot of coaches just throw as much as they can at them, and whoever survives, survives, and that's it, right? Whoever doesn't, they're weeded out, as Hillary mentioned, the retention rate earlier. And so that's obviously really annoying as one of the sports scientists, and as a coach and as a runner or former runner. So what do you guys think? And then again, specific to female athletes, where they might have pre-existing, sort of mental struggles with things like, their appearance or their weight or things like that, or even like just menstrual cycle issues, and they go into a situation like this. Like, how do we sort of shift that paradigm away from that? Let's just train as much as possible and see who dies out, basically. And I know you guys don't fall into this category, but I think it's important for coaches to hear this, that something needs to change at some point. And how does this happen? How do we even move the needle?
I think it's so important. I mean, I feel like I'm in a luxury position as a university coach, in that I have an administration who is supportive of, I want to hold back athletes. If I decide not to race an athlete for a whole year to keep their health at bay. And I have doctors and athletic therapists who support that as well. And I think that that's what needs to happen. It needs to be okay as a coach to hold back an athlete and decide that you're looking at long-term development and health before that immediate performance. And so I think evaluations on coaching shouldn't just be on the fastest athletes in the performance, but it's how long how long did it take, or how long did you spend with that athlete to get them to where they need to go, and not just that one-off, whatever, NCAA champion, or one and done, and throw the eggs against the wall. And you see that a lot. So I think the culture, one, needs to change in the education piece, and athletes need to start taking ownership that their bodies are, I love what Shayla said about that fuel and fire, and you only get one body, so you better take care of it. And if you want it to be fast when it should be fast, you better take care of it early. And the coach has a responsibility to help you do that by educating you, or getting experts to help educate you, and then holding you back so that you can do things properly, because there aren't shortcuts. And if you try to take them, you're really not going to see your full success and see your long-term health.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly how this is going to change. I will say my administration was very supportive of me as well at Cal. And if I ever saw anything, I felt comfortable going to them and letting them know. And I didn't race a few women for a few years because of that. And that was ultimately my call, because it was things I was seeing on a daily basis. But I do think that more universities are adapting that sort of protocol, where they're not going to let the young women run or compete until, and even go to practice until they are making progress towards those goals, those menstrual cycle goals, and maybe weight goals or whatever it may be, mental health issue goals as well. So I'm hopeful that it is changing. I do think in my 7 years, I saw it change for the positive overall at just other universities around the nation. So for those coaches, and I think, you can look at Reds, for instance, like that wasn't established, that whole name wasn't established till 2014. So we're making strides, like within the last 8 years, we're making progress. And now there needs to be protocol, like how can we tell what's going on with these different athletes? How can we help them get better, So, yeah.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a best practice or policy in place. I would love to see, similar to the concussion protocols that we have in place and the strict guidelines that we need to adhere to, that there are also REDS policies, because more people die of an eating disorder than a concussion. And so it is a really, really serious thing. And so we need to have policies in place, and there needs to be accountability. And so I would love to see the NCAA, for example, lead in something like that, so that there were more long-term health being considered before performance, and that their policies were showing that. Because I do think there needs to be more of the hard policies and hard lines happening, like there are concussions, and hopefully we don't need a Will Smith to make a movie about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the policy changes and the changes to approaches, how coaches deal with these situations is certainly such an important topic. And I feel like potentially with more information being shared about these topics over time, it'll shift a bit. And I hate to say it this way, but like the old school approach of coaching, maybe it's getting kind of phased out of the collegiate system now, and people that are coming in now are more aware. So that might just be a time thing. But anyway, so that's great. I think we'll move on from the topic of the menstrual cycle a bit. And there's a couple of questions on the Facebook Live, and I got a bunch of text messages as well for questions. And so one of the things that someone has asked was, nowadays, I paraphrase, nowadays, with social media, it's really easy to see that like the best of the best, and like in the U.S. in particular, you've got some names that I won't name names, but really good athletes in high school, and other high school athletes might be thinking, I'm nowhere near that. Like, am I done? Is this it for me? So as athletes who have had, fairly long careers, through high school, college, and then pros, what is like what's your recommendation or your advice for the high school girl who might be looking at other girls their age that are really, really good right now? And how do you sort of encourage them to think like more long-term, I suppose?
I think it's so important not to compare yourself, and they'll hear that all the time, to not make comparisons. And it's a lot easier now with social media and information on the internet. You can find everything you want to on the internet, so it can really feed into what you think you should be doing. Part of my recruiting strategy as a university coach is to look for undertrained athletes, because I think there's a great opportunity to create that long-term development. And so take your time. Know that you should be peaking in your late 20s or early 30s, and that if you know that you have, you know, a certain amount of training age and that you want to progress each year and not fast track it, that you're just looking at what you can do and individualizing it, and just knowing that you're enjoying it still and you're not trying to get there too quickly. Everybody has a different development curve. And so don't take one workout and think that you should be able to do it.
Yeah, that was always my recruiting strategy as well. Find those untapped talents and build them up. You know, I'd rather get a 214, 5 flat, you know, call it 10-30 girl that I can develop, rather than, well, I'll take the stud too, but don't get me wrong. But yeah, I mean, that person a lot of times can leapfrog, as long as they're following their trajectory and not comparing themselves too much, and just knowing that each and every day you're giving the best that you can give, you know, and recovering to the best of your ability. And sleep, always sleep more. That's the one thing I preach, is sleep. But less is more a lot of times, you know, not trying to catch up and take shortcuts and whatnot. So
Hilary, I'm not sure if you caught that, but Shayla mentioned 10:30. That would be 3,200 or 2 mile. For us Canadians, those times make no sense, but yeah, that's what that was.
Yeah, got it. I can translate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stuck in California, we do the 15 3K in Iowa. So
there you go.
Oh wow, yeah, I didn't know that. I don't that even
used to. I think they changed. I don't know what they've done, but I think they might have changed it.
Yeah. So the live video ended, but I've been recording on here, so I'll post it later. So at least it'll be all recorded. So a couple more questions. So again, like the whole thing about comparing with social media is so tough, right? Like it's hard to, as much as you tell an athlete, don't compare yourself. Like I like to think of it as, it's really hard to think of like the best athletes in the world right now, the pro level, who were studs in high school. Like there's so few of them, right? There's a handful, but it's kind of like Tiger Woods being the best in the world, but oh well, he was good when he was 3, so that must be the way, right? But we forget about the other millions of athletes who started at 3 and you don't know who they are now, right? And vice versa. And so I think it's easy to look at the cases that have been successful and then just say, oh, you have to be good in high school, otherwise you're screwed, kind of thing. But it's obviously not the case. And Hilary, I don't remember your stats in high school, but I remember you were obviously decent, and you were sort of competing at fairly high level, like winning the Ontario champs and
But not until late in high school. Like I didn't make, so in Ontario, the World Championships of high school is OFSA, and I didn't make OFSA my grade 9 or 10 year, and was, I think, 40th at OFSA cross country in my grade 11 year. It wasn't until my last years of high school that I was able to improve, and really that just continued through university. But I had my best years between the ages of like 27 and 35, I'll say, age wise. So I think it's important to have that long-term approach. And I didn't have injuries. Like that wasn't because I got injured and it just took me a long time. It's just how I developed, and I was also able to hold the peak for a long time period, running my best times in those years. So I also think it's really important for young athletes to recognize that the posts and pictures they see on Instagram are a snapshot of what, say, an athlete looks like in their peak performance. Athletes don't often put the pictures of, you know, what they look like the rest of the year. And so it's really important to take note that you need to be healthy and at a healthy body weight all year long. And so don't just look at an elite athlete and compare and think that that's what you need to look like. You shouldn't be comparing yourself anyway, but just recognize that Instagram is a snapshot, and it's so easy to get caught up in that. And so really be kind to yourself and recognize that it's not really the reality of the rest of the time.
Right.
Hilary, what were your marks in high school?
By the end of high school, I ran a 4:22 1500 and a 2:08 800. But the year before that, I ran 4:30 and 2:14. So yeah.
Good.
So yeah, that's kind of the message. Just the progression is so important, and it's different for everybody, right? Like some athletes progress really, really quickly, and then they sort of stagnate for a while, and they might have another jump later on, and others is more linear, and so there's lots of ways to get somewhere, I suppose. Here's a question. I guess this is kind of a hard question, but what are things you know now that as an athlete you wish you knew?
Oh, I think you sent this one, so I think I did
Yeah,
write some stuff down for it.
that was a planted question.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that I wish I didn't always think about like the next race. And I learned this later in my career, but you always think, oh, I'll do it in the next race, or I'll take advantage of this in the next race. And you can really talk yourself, and this is more of a performance thing, but you can talk yourself out of a good performance or testing yourself or the nerves that come along with that. And so I learned that later in my career to never assume there was going to be a next race, and to really be in that moment. And that can go with a lot of things in life, but I think that you can take for granted that you're going to be in that situation or that shape the next time. And I think it's really to capitalize on each race and to use that experience to move on, but not to talk yourself out of a great performance just because you're nervous or you think you're having a bad day.
I think for me, I was constantly playing catch up because I wasn't like, I made the state meet my senior year of high school, and then I didn't make any travel squad until like my fourth year of college. And I was just constantly like trying to play catch up. So a little bit of kind of what Hillary was saying, like just be in the moment a little bit more. And I feel thankful that I can have more knowledge also about the menstrual cycle and things surrounding it. I knew nothing even when I was competing, and I was just like, I wasn't kind to myself. I would beat myself up, and if I had a bad workout or this, that, and the other, and you're going to have ups and downs, and the goal is to be as consistent as possible. So I would say I wish I could have had somebody like me that I do now for my athletes in my ear more. And could have just been more productive with training. And I think I wouldn't have burnt out as quickly as I did as a professional.
Actually, I want to ask, can I ask Shayla a question about that? Just working with athletes, how much time do you spend counseling athletes on training paces and stuff? Do you find like some athletes just want to hammer runs all the time, and that, how much conversation do you have on giving those paces and making sure they recover versus running at like medium all the time?
Yeah, I think especially now being up here in Flagstaff, you can't hammer runs.
Fair enough.
I figured that out, Shayla, pretty quickly.
Did you? Yeah, good.
I'm here right now, and my running partner is Lauren, and I'm in over my head every day.
Oh, I bet. Lauren's one that likes to run fast.
Yeah, she's I'm
sure she's toned it back in
over the years. It's quite different
now.
Over the years, she's but she's still way too fast for me anyway.
Yeah, no, totally. So I think it's become even more important being up here in Flagstaff, and I think it changes cycle to cycle and like what we're trying to focus on. I've kind of gone more back to more of a base phase for the last couple cycles, and I'm trying to get just more like medium type hit workouts in. So I am emphasizing, okay, your easier days need to be a little bit easier. So I think it's an ongoing conversation, but it is that even at the professional level is something that I'm trying to, like they don't know everything. Like that's always a constant reminder for myself is they don't know everything. They need a reminder. We're all human, right? So I think it's an ongoing conversation for sure.
Yeah, good point. Because I think a lot of that's a big transition from high school to university is trying to keep up with the senior athletes just on easy runs. And kind of swallowing your pride and saying I need to recover and run easier on my off days to actually make the workouts matter.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, totally.
There's a certain level of education that needs to be placed around like pace and how relative pace is, right? You just mentioned senior athletes in college versus junior athletes or freshmen. You know, I think coaches historically love to use pace as a gauge of intensity. And sometimes, of course, it can be, but often, you know, you have an athlete who runs like a 7-minute mile, and that's sort of like nearly all out that day. Another athlete who's going, you know, 6:45, and it's a really easy run.
Totally,
So
yeah.
do you guys incorporate RPE and those types of more perceptual measurements like that? And how do you track that? Like, do you have your own Excel sheets or whatnot, or do you just use it on the fly, like how you feel today, 0 to 10 kind of thing, or how does that go?
I try not to prescribe RPE because I find that sometimes athletes will give you the RPE you've asked for.
Yeah.
So sometimes I do, but more often we have a training log, each individual athlete, and we have RPE multiplied by their minutes, which is called TRIMP, and that's a validated measurement. And so each athlete tracks their RPE for each run. And so, yeah, I really actually only give paces for workouts unless I find that an athlete is getting caught up in their easy day runs and running too fast, and then they're not recovering, or their RPE is higher than I'd like for an easy run. So I think that RPE is a great way to go. Heart rate can be, but it can be variable based on lots of other things too. So I do think that RPE, because it's an internal measurement and it's individual to the athlete day to day, is a great way to assess that.
Yeah, mine is just kind of more liberal. Nothing that's really, because I see my athletes every day, so it's a little bit easier, and I have a lot less athletes now too. So it's just kind of that ongoing conversation, and I do link it to heart rate quite a bit too, or just a reminder of like, hey, this is an easy run, so your heart rate doesn't need to be through the roof, and if it is, then we need to just slow down. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we're working the heart out. We're not trying to work our legs out today, you know? So just kind of identifying between the two of those.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. I think, you know, many coaches, as I mentioned before, rely solely on mileage, right? And it can be quite misleading. I'll put a little plug here. Trent, Hillary's husband, and I, and a few others have a paper coming out on, I think it's called something like Beyond Weekly Mileage or something like that. But we make a case for things like what Hillary just mentioned, like training impulse or TRIMP for short, or training load, and things like that can provide a bit more sort of individual ideas of training stress for athletes. But it's good to know that, you know, coaches are doing this, and I know a lot are, and it's different for everybody. Like Hillary might use something more, you know, more numerical, whereas you, Shayla, you because of your exposure, you know, there's more one-on-one, and I think that's more common at the pro level, where you're so in tune with athletes because you're constantly with them, and there's fewer of them. Whereas in high school and college, it can be kind of difficult, and so
yeah, definitely.
Do that.
And you could even use little emojis of happy face, sad face. Like, you don't have to be that technical. You just need to know your athletes and start to get some norms. And yeah.
And sometimes it's not even, it's just like demeanor and like, you know, how they're talking, their tone of voice, right? Like how they text, even like 1 or 2 words, whereas typically it's like 6 paragraphs or email. You know, I think just little details like that. I think sometimes even that is better than nothing, right? So, so we're just over an hour, but there was one question from a high school athlete, and the question was, any advice for high school girls who are potentially at a bit higher level and they don't really have anybody to train with? You know, so they might have guys around, but you know, maybe a bit faster than them, and there's no girls near them. So, you know, and this doesn't apply just for high school, but even like when you were training solo at some point in your lives, you've trained solo, right? I know, Hillary, you have, and Sheila, I'm sure you have at some point. You know, what are recommendations or advice for training solo? You know, on a you know, for X amount of time.
I would say that you can still hopefully do easy runs with some people, so that can change the monotony. But even coaches can get creative with, having only one female athlete and a bunch of guys too. Like often I'll have our 800 girls training with the 3K paced guys, right? So you can mix the workouts. You don't have to say like today is our 3,000 meter workout day. It can be different for the girls and the guys so that you can combine them and they can get paced. Or, if you want to slow down the guys a little bit, you might have them run a little bit slower with the girls. So you change it up. But the reality is that, yeah, you will have some days that you're training alone and you have to prepare for that, run in new places, try different workouts, be creative, and take recovery weeks. How about that for a concept? I think that that's really, really important to not always think that you're just going to progress your training and progress your training and progress your training, because you will not progress your performance if you don't have a deloading week, a recovery week, to be able to adapt to the training and the kind of breakdown that you just put your body through. And that'll help mentally too.
Yeah, and I'll say it's lonely at the top. So a lot of times, even as you progress into college and you're gonna maybe progress through training groups and whatnot, and there's gonna be another moment in your career where you are going to have to be doing things on your own, and kind of look back to why you're doing it, and what's internally motivating for you. What are your goals, and what are some step goals in order to achieve those giant goals? So it's hard to be training on your own, but it can also be really rewarding once those goals pay off.
Yeah. So just to wrap up, guys, and put you on the spot here, what would be like 2 things you would tell high school or young coaches, I should say, what are pieces of advice that you would give regarding to coaching female athletes or even any athlete really, distance runners? Like, what are, in your experiences, two pieces of advice you would give to coaches?
I would say to have patience, to not fast track athletes or to get greedy in terms of overtraining them. I think that that's really important to recognize, that your role as a coach is also to protect them, not just get them to run fast. And so hopefully they're seeing their better years much beyond where you've taken them in that high school period or wherever you're seeing them. And so part of the hopefully the satisfaction of coaching is that you see them go on long beyond when you're coaching them. So being patient and not letting them compare themselves to every other athlete out there, that they're really individualizing and having fun doing it. They got to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. I think as a young coach, being able to take your ego out of the equation as well, I think is really important. And it's something that I wish I could have learned a little bit earlier. It's not about you. It's about the athletes and your development of those athletes, so they do have that long-term career, like Hillary was saying. And then also just develop the relationship with the athlete. Like, that's what this is all about. It's all about the mentorship. And at the end of the day, when you have such a tight-knit relationship with them, they're able to perform way beyond what you ever thought they were capable of, because they trust and love you and believe in you. So those would be my 2 things.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. Again, thank you so much for taking the time. And I know I'm 9 minutes over here, so appreciate that. Yeah, really, really insightful, really useful. I will process the recording, and I will share with Memphis Youth Athletics, and we'll create a post for it. Like I said, we had a